the Fresh Cup podcast. You might notice a little bit of a different arrangement. David, you're over here on the light side because we have a special guest with us today.
I was going to say like the left
the incomparable, the beautiful, the amazing Tania Resendez.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Let's go. You know it's going to be spicy today.
You know it's always a party when Tanya's involved. Right. Yes. Although our topic maybe not be so partiness, but yes. That's okay. But to start us off, I thought it would be fun to talk about, like our families of origin. If there's something that you have that has been passed down through the generations of your family, or the culture of your family that you just love, maybe like a dish. David, this is for you too.
Yeah.
Like a food or a tradition. Tanya, do you have something?
I do. So around birthdays, we always have mole.
Oh,
so my mom will make
nice.
mole. Their families always made mole.
Last night, we went out to dinner for our anniversary, and I had mole enchiladas, but with duck confit inside.
Ooh,
I was
wow.
like, I am the fanciest.
You are fancy.
Now, does your family make mole from scratch, like simmer?
So no, we actually buy it from a very specific person in Mexico City.
No
oh,
way.
wow.
We always
okay.
bring back mole. So my sister gets mole. My brother gets mole if they want some. Yeah.
That's so cool.
I love mole. I know it's like one of those things that people either you love it or you hate it.
Yeah.
Do you like mole?
I love it.
All right, good.
Dana,
I'm glad
Dana's
we are
not
all
a fan,
good company here.
I'm glad we are all in agreement.
Yeah.
That is the Lord's
Yes.
blessing upon this podcast. Mole, everybody. If you're not on board,
Get on board.
get on board. David, what about you? Do you have a family tradition or?
Yeah, so I have two sides. Obviously, everybody has two sides of their family, but from my mom's side, they don't go, their history doesn't go back very far. I couldn't even tell you where that side is really from, other than West Virginia. And so that's kind of
which is a culture in and of itself.
Exactly. So biscuits and gravy, I know that's so just American, Southern, whatever, but biscuits and gravy from that side of family. And then from my dad's side, we actually kind of know our roots in kind of Eastern European history, specifically the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And so pierogi and stuff like that was always a staple around Christmas Eve and always really good food. So yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I have really is my family, from my dad's side is Swedish, and so we do. Kingston and I have continued the tradition of celebrating St. Lucia Day, and so we make saffron buns in December, and yeah, it's a labor of love, and saffron is so expensive to make, but it's just one of those traditions that you just do because it's tradition, and they're pretty average, but they're just like bread, but it's fun to make together.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So today we are going to be talking about just the concept of immigration, the concept of how we as Christ followers just should approach this concept, and I would just want to make this caveat that we're not going to have a policy debate on this because I don't think any of us probably have been in government enough to know all the nuances that come with it, but it's more about thinking about this through the lens of discipleship, thinking about this through the lens of what it looks like to be somebody who wants to walk in the way of Jesus. And my hope and prayer is that, myself included, that we would just have a curiosity about this conversation and not just have this is what I believe because I've been told to believe this, or this is, how I vote. And so I'm going to think about it this way, or this policy supports my, whatever it is. But I'm just hoping that we can just, if you're listening, or if us all here at the table just have a posture of humility and curiosity and just understanding and listening rather than just forming an opinion. So Tanya, why don't you get us started? Tell us a little bit about, because I know you've had lots of experience, not just in the church setting, but you are, a prominent member of our community here, and you have worked with organizations within our community. So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and what you do outside of church and counseling.
Outside of church, yeah. Well, I guess to even start that conversation, I myself am an immigrant. So I came to the United States when I was 4 years old. And so growing up in the community. And
what country did you immigrate from?
We're from Mexico City, La Ciudad de Mexico.
Guess I should have made that jump from the mole talk conversation.
Yeah, so we're from all of our family. I have a lot of family still there. in La Ciudad de Mexico. And so we came here. I was 4 years old when I came. And so growing up in the community, being able to, I knew that I wanted to come back when I went away for grad school because I wanted to help my Spanish speaking community. And so
you wanted to go back to Mexico?
I wanted to come back to the Central Coast.
Oh,
because
okay,
I knew of the lack of resources within mental health and our Spanish speaking community. So I've had different jobs, worked with different organizations, and been able to partner and learn along the way of how to best support our Spanish speaking community right here, right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What organizations have you worked with locally?
With the county, CAPSLO, been able to partner with some other nonprofits. And then there's another program called Promotores. And so they offer translations. And so they've actually helped us for Christmas market.
That's really cool. Do you have any memory from when you lived in Mexico City?
I do, yeah. So a lot of my memories come from church. And so being at church that's a lot of my memories and spending time with family. There's a very specific birthday party with a piñata that I went ham on. So that is a great memory that I have.
Tania and a bat. I think little 3-year-old Tania and a bat. I feel like I'd pay to watch that.
To have social media back then, right? So many of those memories died with the memories, right?
Yep.
Yep.
That reminds me, my nieces, they had a piñata for their birthday party, and my little niece Ava is just like this little spitfire, and we put a bat in her hand, and you just look out.
I love it.
All right, so to start our conversation, I feel like we have to kind of start at the beginning, like the basis, which I think what it comes down to is, like I said, I don't know enough about the nuance of policy to really have like a strong, this is the right thing to do or the right way to go about it. But as a Christ follower, the same way we talked about on our podcast last week, as a Christ follower, I can see some of the rhetoric the way people talk about immigration or immigrants in general, and some of the language that gets used as there's something in me that's like, oof, that feels dehumanizing. That feels like we're not talking about people who bear the image of God in a way that is dignifying.
And to kind of, model or kind of go kind of the next level of that, while we may not be experts on policy, and in the most humility, we are experts on people, because that's who we work with all the time. And we are skilled and we have knowledge about the human soul and what damages the human soul. And we do understand, the things of Scripture and what it means to actually see people as God sees them. So I think beginning there is really important, because that is what we are called to do and trained to do and equipped to do.
Tania, do you have any any thoughts or experience on how you've seen maybe the rhetoric shift over the last, or even as you, an immigrant yourself, have you ever experienced any, negativity or somebody treating you differently?
Well, growing up in this county and being, you used to know pretty much every other person that was Mexican in the area, you knew them. Again, this was a very long time ago, everyone. And so, you ended up knowing a lot of people. Of course, unfortunately, yes. Have I received microaggressions? Have I received racism? Yes. Have I learned how to speak up for myself? Yes. And that has been something to advocate not only for myself, but for the community of having the correct resources for people, whether it's information in Spanish, whether it's parents. When I used to work at the schools, of being able to make sure parents had the correct information. So unfortunately, yes, I have lots of stories to tell that for another time.
We don't need to focus on.
We don't need to focus on that. But also, I think right here, right now, one of the hardest things has been is this kind of black and white posture of if someone, if they're illegal. And so I think one of the things that I correct people with is reminding people that nobody is illegal. They are undocumented. And so using the terminology of documented, undocumented. And so being able, one, to offer that, but also remind people that it is such a process to become documented in this country.
Yeah. As I was thinking about this, And I was thinking about even using words like that, saying illegal versus undocumented. Some people might be like, whatever, what's the big deal? But I think as believers, we have to understand that our words carry weight and our words matter. Even if you think about, even if you go back to Genesis and you like God spoke, the word went out, like Jesus himself is called the word. And so our words matter, and we can, bring life or we can bring death with our words. And it just reminded me of the verse in James. And it says, people can tame all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and fish, but no one can tame the tongue. It is restless and evil, full of deadly poison. Sometimes it praises our Lord and Father, and sometimes it curses those who have been made in the image of God. And so blessing and cursing come pouring out of the same mouth. Surely, my brothers and sisters, that is not right. And I think even if we have, we might have different opinions on policy, but I think we all can agree that our words carry weight and that we should be educated on what words actually hurt people. And we should care. We should care if our words hurt people, right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's good.
So, I guess the question is what does it look like in a practical sense? Other than just using correct terminology and words, to treat somebody as if they are an image bearer. What is God's purpose what does that mean even? I guess, David, that might be a question for you too, but.
Yeah, I think we begin with this idea that if we are created in the image of God, and God creates us not, you can go back to other creation stories, and God creates out of violence, he creates out of degradation.
We've been learning a lot about this in our classes, Tanya.
All kinds of different stuff. But God, when God creates, he creates out of love, out of his primary character. And in doing so, he also creates us in his image. And as I even this past Sunday was talking about, not everybody is a child of God, because you're a child of God when you come into salvation in Christ Jesus, right? But everybody is an image bearer. There is not a person who lives on this planet that is not an image bearer of God. And so someone is treated with intrinsic value and worth, not because of where they live, not because you kind of won the geographic lottery by being born in a particular place or particular socioeconomic class or whatever. You have intrinsic worth and value simply because you are human, which means you were created by God, and therefore you have value. And so beginning at that point should shape then how we talk about people, how we see people, and should inform us as what does it look like to treat this person with dignity and worth and value? Oh, but they didn't originally live here, or they are a lower socioeconomic class potentially, or they're an addict, or fill in the blank of how we try to label people. And what we're doing then is diminishing their dignity and value.
Well, and I think even as a believer, what David, quiz me. I don't know there's no longer slave or Greek or slave or free. What verse is that? Come on, David.
Galatians.
Okay.
Sure. You're asking me too quickly.
I know.
You're gonna have to cut this whole part.
But I feel like that verse in itself should show us that as followers of Jesus, there is no person that is other. And I think so many times when we start when conversations happen around immigration, we start labeling people as us versus them, or me and somebody who is other. And I think that in and of itself, Jesus came and erased all of those lines. There is no other anymore. We are all one, or that's literally what Jesus prayed, was that we would be one, that we wouldn't have these dividing lines. And I think immigration is just one of those things I think that the enemy can use to divide people so efficiently sometimes, sadly. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that, Tanya?
Yeah, that first and foremost, our identity is in Christ.
Yeah.
And that is where we are pointing to, and that is how we are treating other people. Being a loving image to them, being loving and caring, right? Because it's how would you treat me? Mm-hmm. Right? Sharing with you all
the golden rule
of how would you treat, and then how would you literally treat me as I'm sharing my own story, right? I wasn't born here. Mm-hmm. I'm a naturalized citizen, and part of my family is too, and some of them have different statuses. And so, but it's how would you treat me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As a human,
Person.
as a person that is complicated and has a story and isn't just a label. And I think it also goes back to like what we've been talking about in our classes that we've been learning in theology, is like God's original design, God's original purpose in humanity. And sometimes we can get, we talk about being created in the image of God, which means we are created in God's image. God is not created in our image. Right. And also that God created, like you said, out of love. And the whole point was for us to be with God out of love. And I think it comes from God's abundance. And so I think when we can stop perpetuating the curse in our world, which is like, when Adam and Eve sinned, and one of the consequences of sin was Adam was going to have to strive, and the land was not going to be easy to till, like there was going to be hard work. And I think sometimes we perpetuate that when we have the scarcity mindset, when we have a mindset that's like, I have to hold what's mine, and I can't, there's no way that God would have enough for all of us, and I think that is just such a consequence of the curse. And I think as believers, we should have this imagination for, the kingdom breaking in, and God is a God of abundance. And so we shouldn't have to live in fear and treat people poorly because we are either afraid or don't have a big enough trust in God to see his abundant kingdom.
I think what you're getting at in terms of it's a consequence of the curse is actually key, because if you go to like Psalm 139, right, people are going to mostly equate that with babies for whatever reason. Like, it doesn't say that it has to be a baby. It just says that you were uniquely and wonderfully made, right? It says that you were knit together in your mother's womb. So I understand why we do it, but there's something about humanity and believers and non-believers that they can look at a child and they see innocence. But all of a sudden, for some reason, and they can see an image bearer, like especially believers, right? We see an image bearer very easily in the face of a baby or even a small child. But the older that child gets, they, in many people's eyes, because of the curse, lose that age of innocence. And instead of seeing them still as somebody who is an image bearer, who was created and knit together by God, who is uniquely and wonderfully made, they start to see them through their sin or byproduct or fill in the blank of how they begin to see them. And no longer do we wrestle with and we struggle to see them as an image bearer. And when we start to struggle to see them as an image bearer, again, I'm sure there you could probably find an example out there, but very seldom do you find someone who is going to dehumanize a baby. You know what I'm saying? Like that would like boggle our minds. And yet we allow that to happen as somebody gets older. You don't lose your image bearing quality as you get older. You don't lose your image bearing quality even, and again, I would say it this way. The one who sees us this way in terms of like sees us as image bearers all the way through our life is God.
Yeah.
He doesn't look at us and go, oh, wow, I can't believe what you did. You're no longer an image bearer. You're not worthy of the sacrifice of Christ. You're not worthy of, it's through our entire life, no matter what sin we have participated in, God still sees us as image bearers who can be redeemed in that image towards him. And so I think that's an important aspect of the conversation, because when I look at somebody, I want to see them as God sees them. Not through not through the curse, to your point.
Yeah. And I think as you get older, we get messier. And I think it forces us to put our money where our mouth is. I don't know, that's not the right phrase, but it forces us to actually live what we say, in that your mess doesn't define you, right. And so therefore, even if you are messy, or even if you have made mistakes, or you are a sinner, even if you've made giant mistakes, that doesn't define you. So, Tania,
can I say one more thing? Just one more thing about, again, I don't want to dive into policy, but I'll say it this way. Jesus was not, he was not concerned with being misunderstood when he saw people as image bearers, right? Like he was misunderstood all the time as being a friend of sinners, of sitting with people who people are like, hey, why are you sitting with those Gentiles? Why are you sitting with those people that aren't like you, that don't look like you, that believe differently, or any number of things. He wasn't concerned about being misunderstood on those things. He was really okay with being misunderstood when it came to Pharisaical law.
Yeah.
When they didn't understand, like, oh, I don't understand why you would, why are your disciples eating on the Sabbath, or why are they doing this? He was okay with being misunderstood there. And I think at times I watch people who are so concerned about being misunderstood on their policy or their political party persuasion. Like they're like, don't identify me as something else. They're more concerned about being misunderstood on that side of things than they are being misunderstood about their compassion, about their empathy, about getting to know somebody, about seeing someone with human dignity and as an image bearer of God. And I think that is a disconnect, not just in our culture. I think it's a disconnect in the church because we've been shaped by culture. We're so fearful that someone might say, oh, you believe in that policy because you care for this person, or because you have empathy, or because you have compassion. There's a fear there.
Yeah.
And again, I think as followers of Jesus, we have to be more okay with being misunderstood by how we love people than we should be misunderstood in terms of like what party we're affiliated with or what policy we hold to.
Yeah. Agreed. So I know, Tanya, one of your heartbeats about this is getting to know people's story rather than just like what we talking about, labeling somebody or what somebody's status is. I guess the first question is, what do people sometimes misunderstand? And maybe you don't know all the things, but like misunderstand about the immigration process.
But it takes a very long time. I can't stress that enough. So in sharing about different people that I know, so one person is still waiting, and they've been waiting for about 25 years.
Wow.
They've submitted documents 25 years ago and have been waiting. And at this point, it's like, will they still be alive when their date comes around?
Wow.
That's where it's gotten to. So just even like the process of that, unfortunately, the reality that people get scammed into like, oh, I'm going to help you. I'm going to fill out paperwork for you.
Push you to the front of the line.
Yeah. And then they take their money. And so that part, the reality of human trafficking that takes over, and then being in debt, and then people don't have the right resources or don't trust other people because they've been scammed.
Yeah.
Along the way.
I heard the story from my, I didn't know the people, but they went to my old church, and it was the same situation that they 100% thought that they had the status because they paid the money and they did all the right things, and they didn't realize that they had been scammed. And so they end up getting deported, but they didn't even know at all that they didn't have the status that they thought they did. And they had done all the right things that so much so as they thought, but they had been scammed. And that was the first time I was like, oh, I mean, obviously we get scammed for everything. There's obviously people who are going to prey upon people who are desperate. And especially if there's like a 25-year wait, if there's an option that's like, well, you can get it now, you just got to pay this extra money. Why would people not, jump on that when they don't know that it's a scam?
Yeah, and there does seem to be, again, thinking about that same story, because I was able to, read their story and kind of get to know it a little bit. There does seem to be an expedited process for people who have an extraordinary amount of wealth or money, or that have some type of degree or platform that they are bringing. And so I think sometimes it gets misconstrued. Oh, the process is quick and easy, or you just have to do the right steps, and within a year or two, you're going to gain your status. And so again, I think this is not even talking about policy, just from a socioeconomic aspect of how we understand the poor, how we understand people of different socioeconomic classes, that we should be concerned when there's not an equal access to the same type of expedited process or process for everybody. And that should concern us, because
we are people of justice. We're
people of justice. And as a people of justice, and as followers of Jesus, we, how we care for the poor, how we understand those maybe. And when I say poor, I'm honestly talking working class at this point. I'm not talking about people who, again, yes, there's impoverished, but I'm even talking about working class. I'm talking about people who are probably even middle to upper middle class at times. But if you don't have that extreme wealth, or if you're not, a graduate from MIT or Northwestern or UCLA, and you have, a need of a company in our area or in our country, then the process becomes way more difficult. And so I think it's easy for people, depending on their view of everything, to be like, oh no, I heard that it's easy to get the process done. Well, it is, but you have to fit such a, small, narrow criteria to make that process faster, that I think that people are unaware of how difficult it is for the average person.
And that it looks different right now than it did in the 80s.
Correct.
For example,
Yes.
just even that, right? And that everybody's story is different of how they came in. So it looks very different right here, right now in 2026.
Do you have, because I honestly don't know, like, do you have any insight, like, why does it take up to more than 25 years? Is it literally like there's just a line? Like you're just basically
and there's
like
priority dates. There's priority dates, and it kind of depends on country too. And so there's all these different details that goes into it. But yeah, some of you have a date, and you have to wait for that date or that date to pass in order to file.
And is it one of those things that's like, if there was just more resources that it would make it, or is it intentionally make it hard?
Well, that part I don't know, but
yeah,
it just takes a long time, and people are just waiting.
Yeah. And obviously understand, there's a process and all that kind of stuff. I don't know enough about it to know. And maybe you have some insight. Obviously you are an immigrant, so you have that whole different perspective than a lot of people do. But have there been other situations, or, just being in proximity to people's stories, that shaped or changed your perspective on a lot of things?
A lot of it is our own story and our family's story that has shaped how I view things. One of the things that my dad came to the Central Coast first, and so the family that helped him were also immigrants, and they were immigrants. That's my Armenian family, so shout out to them. But they're the ones that helped my dad, right, in just building this community. And their hospitality is off the charts. Them whole as a family, of just how they brought my dad into their life and how they helped him, and how in turn when we came, of how they helped us, of just literally being the hands and feet of Jesus to us.
Now, how would you say, like, what are some practical ways maybe that somebody who might be, ignorant to immigration or anything like that, how can we learn people's stories? Like, how, I won't want to like form an opinion on somebody without learning their story. But people aren't going to be like, hey, let me tell you, you know what I mean?
Let me tell you all the things that have happened to me.
Yeah.
No, well, I'm going to share some resources at the end. There's a Right Now Media Engaging Immigrants that is really great. If somebody's like, okay, I want to learn more about this, right? Different books that someone can start just getting some more language, some more knowledge, understanding other people's stories within the church as well.
Yeah. And I think, obviously as followers of Jesus Christ himself, like, I think he, like you said before, we were talking about how he was totally fine with being misunderstood and erring on the side of compassion and love and dignity for people. So I think that's like, obviously our situation in 2026 is very different from anything that Jesus would have experienced. So it's not a 1-for-1, but I guess it's like, what did Jesus have to say about this? Or like, I guess I go to like Matthew 25, when he's talking about like, people are thinking that they're doing stuff in Jesus' name. Yeah. And Jesus is like, I didn't know you because you didn't, care for visit people in the in prison. You didn't care for the stranger. You didn't clothe the naked. Like, those are the types of things that show whether or not you know Jesus. So I guess, is that transferable to like our modern day? Like, how do we as people in 2026 read Jesus' words that says, like, I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was a stranger and you invited me in. Like, what does that mean in our context? And does that have any relevance to this conversation?
Yeah, I think one of the things that it does is it makes us take inventory of how we view that challenge from Jesus. And I think that there is I'll just speak from my own experience and pastoring and kind of an evangelical church, that I think that there's a lot of people who, when they hear that command and they hear that challenge from Jesus, they think either global missions or they think about, soup kitchens, for lack of a better way of saying it. And I think that's where most people hear that. They're just like, all right, that's how. So how do we live that out? Well, I'm going to either give my tithe, or I'm going to give specifically to some type of project or some type of missions. Maybe I'll even go there on a short-term mission or something of that nature. And we're like, okay, check. I just lived into that command. But what happens when we're made more uncomfortable? When we have to start wrestling with, okay, now my neighbor, now the people that are in my sphere of influence, now the people that I work with. And again, I want to kind of move it, because again, we can talk immigration policy, but let's even remove it even just specifically from immigration and talk about, okay, what does it look like when the person, who moves in the neighborhood, who doesn't think like you, act like you, or believe like you? What does that look like? What does it look like for the person who might identify in terms of their sexuality different than how you view sexuality? What does it look like from immigration? What does it look like to have somebody who is released from prison and move and become your neighbor next door all of a sudden? And like, how do I interact with that person? How do I when people are impacted by the curse? So I guess my what I want people to kind of wrestle with is, it's easy to write a check. It's easy to go for a week. It's much more difficult to integrate this challenge from Jesus into our everyday lives. And so all of a sudden that creates discomfort. It creates, hey, I don't get to just do whatever I want anymore. I've got to think about things differently. I've got to think more intentionally, be more reflective on it. I can't just post something or make an opinion or whatever, because all of a sudden my words have weight, how my actions have weight, because Jesus goes on later to say, hey, if depart from me if you don't live into this reality. And so I don't know that most people think about that. They think about, oh yeah, I did my job, but what about, our sin of omission? Like, hey, I'm just going to avoid it, or I'm not going to do anything about it. And all of a sudden, we are held in judgment as followers of Jesus for how we think about and think about people and treat people. And this is very intertwined, not just in this passage. This isn't just one passage. Throughout the scriptures, it is intertwined. You cannot say that you love God and hate others. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like it's impossible. Like, you can't actually do that. So.
I think the Good Samaritan is like the perfect example of what you're talking about, because I think we all want to think that we're going to be the Good Samaritan until it actually costs us something. Right. And I think that's where the conversation gets hard, because, everybody, like you said, it's easy to do this, or it's easy. And for some people, it's easy to write a check. For other people, it's not so easy to write a check, vice versa. Mm-hmm. But it is whatever is like for you, like what is, when it starts to cost you something, whether it maybe not monetary, but maybe it costs you your reputation, or it costs you like your feeling of safety. Like if you said somebody moves in next door to you that, just got released or something like that. When it's something that like costs you something, is when it's like, okay, where am I going to allow myself to be a disciple of Jesus in a way that like is actually taking up my cross, is actually something that is the cost of discipleship.
Well, let's even, like, again, this might be a weird kind of related topic, but the further you are from something, the less it costs you. So, we're getting ready to approach Memorial Day weekend, right? The further you are from having served or having someone that has been lost through war, as we talked about in our last episode, the less you feel the weight of that costly day, right? The closer you are to it, the more you feel that weight. And I would say the same thing when it comes to how we see our neighbor, how we care for people, how we understand people, how we see people as image bearers. The further you are from somebody, the less costly it is, and it's easier to make opinions, and it's just not that costly. The closer you're up, the more. That's why throughout the book of Luke, you have Jesus having table fellowship. In fact, there's whole theology around the book of Luke that basically Jesus kind of ate his way to sharing the gospel, right? But what that represented was fellowship with people, a closeness with people. That and God does that with us, right? I love the Message translation of the beginning of the book of John, where it says that God became flesh and he moved into the neighborhood. And so that invitation to move into the neighborhood, to move into somebody's house, to sit down at the table with them so that we might see them as an image bearer is going to be costly.
Yeah.
Because it costs time.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. And sometimes time is more valuable than money.
And so being able to spend time with people, being able to see that new neighbor or that new family as an opportunity to show Christ's love to them.
Yeah. And I think even the story of the Good Samaritan challenges us in that, because, that he spent time and money helping somebody, and he helped somebody who was very different from him. And I think the Good Samaritan challenges sometimes of, I don't know, I don't want to say it's innate, because it's definitely not, because it's not part of God's design for humanity, but this tribalism, I think that can creep up into our culture. And I think Jesus, by telling the story of the Good Samaritan, challenges the thought of tribalism, that it's no, you have to, and sometimes you have to go out of your way in order to have table fellowship with somebody who thinks differently than you, or has a different story than you, or comes from a completely different background from you. But I think as followers of Jesus, that's so important to, break down our own, lenses that you don't see clearly. Tania, have you seen that in your life? Have there been people, you talked about your Armenian family, that have shaped that? Or is there somebody maybe that you have seen in your life that's this person exemplifies Matthew 25, this person exemplifies welcoming the stranger or visiting, is there an example in your life that you follow?
Oh yeah, that would definitely be my Armenian family. They are just amazing in their love and care for how they cared for us, how they've cared for other families. And just even there's, on a separate note, someone that works locally, we were able to help this person. He was helping a family out, and there was 4 of them. They were undocumented. Mom ended up going back to Mexico. And then there was a 12-year-old daughter. The boy was about 8. And so then eventually the daughter went back, was I miss my mom. And so they made a hard decision. They went back, and then it was the father and the son here. And the father died and just had a heart attack, and his son is the one that found him. And so then how this community member wrapped his arms around the son, finding family to be able to take him. And then eventually he was able to go back and be reunited with his mother. But that he is just one individual that I'm he goes above and beyond, and just loving the people he works with, but also just caring for the community as a whole locally.
Yeah. Do you have any, maybe this is going too much into it, but do you have any ideas for ways that we as a church even could start to, have table fellowship with our community as a whole, not just the people who come to New Life or come occasionally or something, but opening up that table. I saw, now I can't remember where I saw it, but it was people who, they just invite random people to a dinner at their church. And I was that would be just cool. You just meet somebody on the street, hey, you want to come to dinner tonight? Have you seen anything like that, or any ideas or anything that has shaped you?
There's been more events as community events or resources of being able to meet people there. We do have locally Immigration Hope. And so just that's another organization where people can volunteer, right? They have literacy classes. I know they had Bible studies. So different ways within the community to help. Sometimes, right, there is a language barrier, but we remind our pantry volunteers, because we have different people with different languages that come in, that a smile, right? The approach does tell a lot, right? Our communication, 80% is nonverbal. And so being able to just even offer like a smile and acknowledgement of like, hey, like welcome, even if the other person doesn't understand, like that says a lot already.
Yeah, that is always a challenge, but to make sure everybody feels like they belong, even if we don't speak the same language.
I would even take that to even just walking down the street, right? I think if as followers of Jesus, I've tried to make a conscious effort when I pass people. And now we obviously live on the Central Coast. We're not in LA where people are a little bit more like, hey, I'm just going. But I try to recognize people as I'm just walking on the street. As I'm going on my walk in the morning, I will pass homeless people. I will pass people walking to work or walking to the bus station. And just being able to say good morning or, smiling at them as you're passing, again, communicates two things. One, that person or you view that person as having dignity because you acknowledge them. And then I think secondly, it's that we're a part of this community. And if I smile at you, if I give you a nod, if I say hello, good morning, or whatever, I know that sounds so simple, but it says, hey, I view you as someone who actually belongs in my community. I don't see you as an outsider.
Yeah.
I don't see you as somebody who shouldn't be here or with skepticism. And so I think that can be just a really powerful way of taking a first step. It's not the end all, but it's a first step for someone who maybe has never even thought about things like this.
Yeah. And I think, in this conversation, the Bible, as we've talked about already, the Bible speaks pretty clearly about how we treat people, but it's less clear when it comes to policy. That's why we're not going to this is what you should do, we're not going to have that in this conversation. But I guess the question that I sometimes come back to as I wrestle with these types of things, because I feel like there's very clear for how I should operate as Elena, as a disciple, but how does that shape, what I vote for or what I, support? And is there a disconnect or is there something connected? Is there even a difference between my own personal compassion and public compassion or corporate compassion, I guess? Is that a weird question? How does that translate?
Yeah.
Anyone?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that is difficult is that policy, and I guess maybe back up and say I'm not sure that there maybe is such a disconnect, but policy tends to have so many things, so many bullet points underneath it.
Yeah.
And so while something can look and be like, hey, I would agree with this at the highest level, when you get into the weeds of actually what's happening, that's where I start asking myself questions about, okay, is this compassionate? Is it, bullet point 1, 2, and 3 might be, but bullet point 4, that's something that I disagree with. So then how do I bring attention to that? And one of the things that I've noticed, and again, I know my goal here is not to, I don't know enough. But what I do know is that people have tended to start to blanket statement policy or blanket statement approval for policy or for political parties in such a way that they have lost their voice to challenge that. Just because I disagree with, points 4, 5, and 6 does not mean that I toss everything, the baby out with the bathwater. Does that make sense? And so I think that
we've become just so extreme in our policy and politics so much that there's no, room for disagreement. And even if we're on the same, we can agree on a lot of things, but doesn't mean we have to disagree on everything.
So on the flip side of that, though, I do think it's way easier to own our own local, my own compassion than I think it is policy compassion. Yeah, that's because I just don't have control over it. And so I forget what theologian said it, love the next person in front of us. Because we're love the world. Well, that's how do I do that? And I think if you get enough people, though, who love the next person in front of them, who have compassion for the next person in front of them, who get to know the next person in front of them, if you have enough people doing that, it actually does shape policy, or at least shapes culture. Right. And so even when policy at a 60,000 foot view might be X, the culture of our specific community can look different because how we implement that, how we view it, how we care people through it. When we started the pantry, we knew we wanted to distribute food. There's a lot of ways you can distribute food, right? The goal was to distribute food. How we chose to do that was you choose. And you choose for us was not about like, hey, we want to be lazy and just let people choose, or we don't want to put bags together. It was all about human dignity. It was like there's something about walking into a place and still, even if you're under-resourced, and being able to choose the food that's best for your family. There's something about making that choice that raises the person's level of dignity. So how we chose to achieve that end actually mattered. And so I would say something similar, like without getting into the weeds about policy, how we go about policy, we might agree, hey, you know what, we need to have borders, we need to have this, we need to have immigration policy, but then how we go about achieving those things says something about our core beliefs and convictions as Jesus followers, and I would even say, you know, taking Jesus out of it as Americans. Like it says something about how we go about that. And so I think that's key, and the how actually matters, because the how speaks to the deep core conviction of what you believe about somebody.
That is true. And I think it, you know, if we go back to like the discipleship point of our podcast is, you know, I think sometimes when we get into this conversation, I think the trap that we fall into is the same trap that you're going to have to correct me on my Bible again, but like whoever Jesus was talking to about the Good Samaritan, the person was like, yeah, but like, who is my neighbor?
Right.
Like, let's be specific. Like, who is my neighbor? And I think is when we get into talks, when we get in the weeds of policy, we start being like, but like, who is my neighbor?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the discipleship comes in, is that, you know, Jesus answers that with the story of the Good Samaritan, right? And I think that is, you know, if we are going to be Christ-like, that I think is our answer to that question, shows where our trust is, I guess.
Yeah. And even the final answer after Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan is which one was the neighbor? And he said, and you know, he can't even say the Samaritan. That's how much disdain there is in his heart for this particular people group. And I think that, again, we should be reminded, like, I imagine that person, when they hear Jesus' teaching on the Good Samaritan, similar to the rich young ruler, walked away sad.
Yeah.
Walked away forlorn, like, oh, that's who I have to be. That's who you're calling me to be. Oh, like, I'm not quite, because they were so wrapped up in their view rather than Jesus' kingdom view of how to see people. So,
yeah. And so I think, like, I don't know, as we talk about this, is there, I guess, Tania, is there something you wish that more people understood? Like at the end of the day, like, what do you hope that people listening to this podcast would understand about this topic?
Just over the past year and a half, the fear that has been in the Spanish-speaking brown, whether, right, there's all different kinds of people here in the U.S. that are of brown skin tone, like of the fear that has gone across the United States for that. There's just been a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear in the community. People didn't want to leave their houses, rightly so, because they were scared. It wasn't even, am I documented or not?
Right, because people would, even if you just didn't look.
And so my parents and I had this conversation, like, do we need to walk around with our passport card or our copy of our passport to have something like, if we get stopped, you are just going to be in fear of not even able to answer.
Yeah.
And my parents, they can get by in English, but they would not be fluent until they're like, I don't think I can even answer. If anybody were to ask me, I'd probably be in shock and not be able to answer. And so we had that own conversation, just even friends like locally, like, is this what we need to start doing? Like for us? So I'm being able to understand that, like, there has been a fear. Yeah. Have I questioned, like, is that ICE? Am I going to get stopped? There is a local alerts that get sent out, that have been sent out over the past year and a half of where ICE is or where raids have happened. And so, that fear does cross even my own mind. So being able to know that and learning people's stories.
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing. Learning people's stories will change somebody else's life.
do you think that this just popped in my head. Do you think that people who are so extreme on the one side of this issue in terms of, we need to, deport everybody, everybody, I mean, like the rhetoric is there, like this idea that everybody who is from, another country is a murderer, a rapist, or something like that. Rhetoric is just so dehumanizing and does not represent the majority of people. Do you think that there's a view from that point of view that the flip side is true for anybody that talks about immigration maybe in just a responsible way, right? That somehow we want just full open borders and no immigration and there's no sense of way of or process. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, like, do they just assume that, like, if you think differently than that all of a sudden it's just like a free for all?
Well, I think we live in a black and white society right now of it's either or. Like there can't be any just even conversation about that. It's like, okay, no, I understand that there's policies. I understand there's procedures. Yes. Do I don't agree with the timelines? Yes. But also the inhumane part is what gets me of like, that's not how you treat people.
Right.
Of just even stopping somebody because of the color of their skin, of questioning
or
them.
what language they speak.
Or what language they speak, of just not the treatment has gotten to me. So I've had my own personal work. I've had to do work through that because I was so hurt for the community.
Yeah.
Is there any practical ways that you have, other than just, I guess, time with the Lord, because I think everybody has, whether it's this subject or it's another subject, but there's things that you can disagree with that, not even just like a disagree, but like this hurts me personally. Are there any ways that I guess God has helped you in that area to still have, strong convictions, but learn to love people that think differently than you? Yeah.
Well, and it has been, it's that, right. We are all image bearers. And yes, sometimes we're not agree on certain things. Have I just personally in my own like quiet time have come again and again, like this lamenting of back to God of like what I'm seeing within my own community and just like the bigger community of the United States, lamenting to God through this and reminding myself I'm not in control of this. But yes, I can be an advocate and I can be an ally for the community.
And I think even coming on something like this and sharing, and I know that it can probably stir up all kinds of nerves and whatever, because again, people in our current culture context are so quick to misjudge or judge somebody based on a soundbite or this, that, or the other. But what I would say is it shows your willingness to love your neighbor who doesn't think like you. So, to love your neighbor who maybe has policy ideas and ways of thinking about this that are way different than yours, and you're saying, hey,
and actually can harm you. And I guess that's what's hard.
Yeah, even to the point of harming you and the people that you care about, and you're willing to come on and try to bring understanding, so that is a way of loving that neighbor. And so, again, when we say loving your neighbor, we mean the full spectrum. It is loving our immigrant neighbor, and it's loving our neighbor who thinks way different on immigration than that immigrant, right? And having these types of conversations, I think, are so key. And I just thank you for your, just being open to coming and sharing and helping us just to talk through this, because it is, here you have two individuals that our interaction with the immigrant community is probably pretty minimal, obviously compared to yours, but yet we can't get away from this calling of God, that God has to care for those who are immigrants, who are the foreigners, who care for those who are poor, to care about justice. Like, those are still things that, just because they're not close to us in our story doesn't mean that it gives us a pass to not care about it.
Yeah. So you mentioned before, what are some practical ways that we can either get in proximity, that we can, learn more or participate in justice in this area in our community? Do you have any tips? And maybe if you have them, we could put them like links. If you have links, we could put it in our
I have
podcast.
a couple links for you. But yeah, just even looking up in our local community, Catholic Charities offers different resources to just even learn about immigration, and then Immigration Hope is close by, and so they are also a great resource. And then I'll have a couple more links.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Do you have any other closing thoughts or anything else, like how we as Christians can, like, not oversimplify something that's just complex? Any final words of wisdom?
Right, everything through the Bible of how people were moved from one place to another, how the story of Joseph of going into, and so looking back at all these stories of people were leaving their home and how were they welcomed or not welcomed. And so that we want to be people that are welcoming to all.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Tania,
Thank you
for
having
coming
me.
on. David,
Thanks.
do you have any other thoughts?
No final thoughts. I think what my heartbeat, as we've been doing kind of this whole series, I think my heartbeat is for people to wrestle with it.
Yeah.
Wrestle with the question. Don't just, hey, social media post said it, therefore that's how I'm going to think. I'm in a season of just seeking the Lord right now. And I'm reminded of how intentional you have to be to seek the Lord and wrestle with the Lord. And it has nothing to do with this. It's just my own personal life, just saying, God, I want more of you. And I just would encourage people when it comes to these very complex issues and how to, when you talk about loving others, there's complexity there. It's hard. It's challenging. It takes time. It takes intentionality. And I would just encourage people to seek the Lord and allow the Lord to shape our hearts. Like, I want the heart of the Father at the end of the day. And so, while someone might be listening to this, I guess the best thing that could happen out of this is you have more believers who are seeking the Lord, saying, God, I want to love my neighbor well. I want to love the foreigner well. I want to love people that are image bearers well. Teach me how to do that.
Amen. I think that's a great place to end. Thank you, Tania. We love you.